Hello, you guys. Today we're going to be doing a makeup and chat, and we're going to be talking about perseverance, about how God uses the things that He allows us to go through to shape us to be who He has called us to be. So perseverance, it's the reason why I chose to make this shirt. I was going through a lot in my life during this time when I first when God had called me into starting a business, and this one really persevering was something I really had to. Persevering was something I just had to just with everything that was going on in my life. Persevering was just something that was just I had to do, and it really stuck out to me, the word perseverance. So that's why I chose to make the shirt. If you guys do want to order, the link is in I'll put the link in the description box below. Perseverance, where to start with perseverance. One thing I have learned on my journey is that God will allow us to go through things, but our pain's not in vain. Like everything that He allows us to go through really does work out for our good. So I was going through just a really tough time in my life over the past year. God has separated me from everything that I knew, and He separated me from everything that I had knew, like my friends and my family, and just He put me in isolation just to be alone with Him. And during that time, it was just a very difficult time. I was doing a lot of spiritual warfare and a lot of warfare in my life, and it was just me and my son during this time in Jesus, and it was very difficult because of the things that I was experiencing. Like, the warfare in my life was crazy. I was having a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of pain, a lot of everything that I was just going through during the time, but just persevering through it. And now looking back at it, I don't regret any of it, because it definitely made me stronger to who I was. So during this time, a lot of what I did to myself was I opened myself up to a lot of just the spiritual realm, a lot of demonic spirits, and having to persevere through that and standing and trust. It also taught me to have faith in God, because I remember one night I had prayed and I was it was really when I realized that I really just have all faith in God. I knew that it was Him that was protecting me through what I was going through. I was it was Him. I knew that it was nothing, that it was none of me, and it was all of Him that was covering me. So it really helped strengthen my faith. But that was a very difficult time. These things, it was a very strange time. But it taught me just to be stronger. I know God allowed it for a reason. And I say persevering because what I was experiencing was a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of nightmares, a lot of just strange. I couldn't even really explain it to this day, but it was a lot of torment that I was dealing with. And I was confused in the midst of this, and just trying to follow God's voice in the midst of it all, and just knowing I didn't really understand anything that was really happening or going on. I just knew to trust in God and to, not deny Jesus. And that's what I did. But it was definitely a very difficult time in my life. But then, shortly after God had called me out of state, He told me to not wait till I have it all together, to just up and move. And so I left. I left and I moved to Oklahoma. I live in California now. I'm back home now because I was out there for 2 months and God had called me back. But I left. I just packed up. I sold everything I could out of my apartment. I left everything behind. My car was broke down. I left the car, left everything else I had in the apartment, and I think I had about $500, and I took that, and with no plan, I just decided I was just gonna go up and I just knew that God was gonna cover and protect me during this time. I just decided just to up and go and leave with Him. I finished my eyebrows off the camera, but I took I think I had about $500, and me and my son, we left, and I knew I had a faith that God was going to just protect me and honestly cover me through it. One of the reasons why I knew it was time to go was because Pastor Todd, Transformation Church, I don't know if you guys have heard of him before, but I had a vision of planes shooting out of the sky, and I didn't know what that meant at the time when I had the vision. But then I started to watch him, and he was I'm trying to help someone understand the vision. God doesn't want you to wait to go, wait for you to have it all together to go. He wants you to go. and I ended up leaving. I ended up actually going to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the first stop when I got there, as I went to the church, and I was like, looking back at it now, I have way more, like, looking back at it now, I should have seeked God for more guidance before I went there. But that is where I went to. And I went to the church, and I was like, God called me, God told me to come here. And it was an experience. You know, they came out, no one was really at the church. I couldn't even get into the church, but they came out, and they're like, they prayed for me, and they ended up calling the cops. And I didn't want them to call the cops, because prior to me going out there, I had a little bit of a journey to get there. And they ended up calling the cops, but the cops were super nice to me. They were super friendly, they were super nice. And they ended up they called some shelters up and ended up taking me and my son into a shelter. And yeah, and that's ended up at the shelter. I didn't know what God wanted me to do when I was there. I just know that he told me to move from home, and that's like just what I did. So yeah, and while I was there, you know, I joined the church, and I really liked the church. I liked the church. I was still on my journey of learning God and, you know, gaining more wisdom and things like that. So I had my experiences while I was there. While I was there, I was just ministering the gospel to people, and I just wanted to get everybody saved. And it was an experience for sure. I would say it was a good one though. Yeah, and I started off there, and, you know, I started to try to build a life out there. And I was like, okay, God, like, why can't I find a job? Like, what's going on? And that's when he told me to move back home. And I moved back home. So I packed up, you know, once again. And I took I didn't have much money either. Once again, you know, and I just took what I had, and me and my son, I got another train ticket, and I moved back home to California. And this was a very painful train ride. Like, during that time while I was there, I was still experiencing a lot of battles, like a lot of just spiritual battles, you know, a lot of just like sleepless nights, you know, a lot of tormenting nights, you know what I mean? I was very tormented during this time, and I just knew that just to keep pushing forth with Jesus and just going with him through this journey. So when I first got back, I went to my mom's house. I felt like God was calling me to go there. So I went there, and it was not the best experience. My mother, I was on this hype of just trying to get her saved. I was trying to get everyone saved, and, you know, looking back now, I know I have more wisdom now, so I probably wouldn't have did it in the way that I did it then. You know what I mean? I know that, like, I would have did it probably very differently, you know, about that. But she was not receiving at all. Also, like, before I had left, me and my mom, how was kind of a rocky relationship. So she was not already kind of probably just a little iffy on me anyway. So that was just an experience, you know, in itself. And I was like, okay, well, I already knew I wasn't planning on staying there long. I knew that probably God was gonna probably call me back, you know, for whatever reason, back to a new place, you know. So I started looking at shelters around like where I lived, and I ended up finding one. And yeah, so I ended up going to that shelter, and when I got to that shelter, I felt like God was telling me to go to another one. And I ended up going to a different one, and I do believe that was the one that God truly did want me at in the first place. It's a faith-based shelter, and I was there for a year, and during that year, it was a very like hard year. You know, for the first 6 months when I got back, not even for 6 months, so from like, I would say from November to April, for 6 months, I was without a job. And this was really, really hard for me during this time. I was still trying to learn God's voice, but during this time, I feel like it's all like in the midst of all the confusion and in the midst of all the mistakes, it taught me what was God and what was not God. I made a lot of mistakes on my journey with learning God's voice, you know. So when I first got to that shelter, I did not like it at all. It was not the best shelter, okay? And I confused my flesh wanting to leave for God's voice, so I decided I was going to pack up and leave. And I thought God was telling me to go to this church, and I went to this church, and the church was like, you know, you know, they gave me food, and they that's kind of how that went. But I sat outside that church. I did not want to go back to that shelter, and a lady ended up buying me a hotel for the night. And I do believe that was God in the midst of that. In the midst of my confusion, I truly do believe that God was guiding me and leading me. You know, I don't recommend just doing things, you know, just doing things, just expecting God, just like doing things that without asking God first. You know, I feel like, but I do feel like if your whole heart is in it, and if your whole heart is in it, and you truly just don't know, you feel like it is God telling you to do something, I do believe that God does still lead and guide you and help you. I can just know from my journey, that's always what I say, because I spent a lot of times where I thought I heard from God, and I wanted to do something, and later on I realized that maybe that wasn't God, but He still covered me and backed me through what I did. And that, you know, and that's kind of what happened with the hotel. So I ended up getting a hotel. You know, I did this, so I had a hotel the first night. The next night, I feel like God was calling me to go to a church. And I knew that church He really did call me to go to, because He sent me a sign when I got to the church. You guys, this is my son. So it was confirmed that that was the church that I was supposed to, that God did guide me there. Is confirmed. And so I went there to the church, and they were having an event. They were giving out clothes away. And I said, God called me here. And they said, well, just wait till the end. And they said they had something for me. And they ended up getting me a hotel for the night. And the next day was Sunday. And I ended up going to church there on Sunday. And afterwards, I ended up back on my journey, because I was trying to avoid going back to the shelter where I had first came from. And I was just going back on my journey from just, you know, I was just living day by day. You know, I was trusting God. I was walking by faith. You know, I didn't have a lot of wisdom at that time when you know, God said, like, you know, live day by faith. I was literally like living day by faith, meaning like I was just trusting God every single day to provide for me in some way, which if God does guide you to do that, I believe that God is a God who does guide you to do that. However, I always believe in getting confirmation before you do things like that, because let God give you confirmation with that, and let God lead you, and He will confirm every single time exactly what He wants you to do. So please do that first. So that night I went and I sat in front of the church. That's what I kind of would do every single time, like something would, like, you know, I will always just go to the church for help. Every time I needed help, I would go to the church, and the church will always find something to do with me. So I'm a strong believer in going to the church for help. And I sat outside the church, and I was sitting outside of there, and a lady had walked up to me, and she was like, "Are you waiting for someone?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm waiting on the Lord." And I was like, I'm waiting for Him to come, you know, I'm waiting on the Lord, because I was like, God was going to provide me another way to sleep that night, you know, and He did. And so she said, okay, she had left, and she had called her mom, and her mom had came, and tell me why her mom was the girl from one of the teachers from the shelter. And I was like, oh no, guys. At first she was gonna give me a hotel, and then she's like, no, I'm just gonna bring you back to the shelter. I was like, oh, don't bring me back to the shelter, I don't want to go back there, you know. But she ended up bringing me back. They took me back in, and yeah, I knew that was where God wanted me to be, you know, because I knew that's where God wanted me at that shelter, because every single time people kept telling me about the same shelter to go back to, and I was trying to avoid going back there. But I knew that's where God wanted me to be. So I decided just, you know, since I knew that was where God wanted me, even though I knew I didn't want to be there, I decided just to stay there, because I knew that's where God wanted me to be. It was a very tough decision. You know, looking back, I kind of just buckled down. I told myself, no, I'm just going to buckle down and just, you know, and just go with the journey of what God had, what He wanted me to do, which was be there. While I was there, they had classes every single night at the shelter I was at, and one of the teachers was speaking, and what he said really got to me. Because I knew that God was speaking to me, and not in a bad way though. But he was like, God's gonna let you keep making that same mistake until you learn to stop doing it. And so I knew from that point on to learn that you know, to make sure that I was hearing from the voice of God and not anything else, you know. And while I was there during those classes were teaching me a lot. We had them twice a day. And they were teaching me, like, while I was there, even though it was super hard, like, the environment was not a good environment at all, and I was like, I had no phone, you know, and I didn't really know anyone there. It was super difficult for me. I didn't want to be there, and it was just really, really hard. You know, the second time after I left and came back, I would say that it came a little bit more easier for me though. I started to just enjoy it a little bit more, but it was still very, very difficult. So for the for the first 4 months of me being there, I was without a job, which was super, super difficult. Well, it wasn't difficult, like, because, you know, my finances, like, you know, I ended up getting on CalWork, so I was able to still have money in my pocket, but it was still, you know, it was still difficult because I was looking for a job during the time. I didn't really know. I was still learning God. I knew what he was calling me to do, but I was just kind of going with the process. And like, yeah, so while I was there, I really started to learn more and more. Like, I was growing. Like, you know, it taught me a lot from the mistakes that I made and what I had to go through and endure. Because, you know, while, you know, as time went on of me being there, it got really, really bad. Like, the spiritual warfare became so bad there. But it taught me a lot. It taught me, you know, how to hold my tongue. That was one thing it had taught me. It taught me patience. It taught me how to love. It taught me discernment too. It taught me how to discern, you know, because when I first came there, I was just on this, like, I just wanted to love, and that's just all I wanted to do. But while I was there, I feel like God started to teach me, like, I started to learn more and more about, you know, from my mistakes, I learned what not to do, you know. Like, I feel like how to discern people and not get myself, you know, caught up with things that I probably shouldn't have never faced in the first place because I wasn't discerning. And it got really bad during that time with the warfare. You know, I started, like, the warfare during that time was so bad because I feel like, you know, the more I grew with the Lord and the more, like, I came to his light, the darkness really started to, like, really, like, I was able to see the darkness, and trying to navigate around that darkness, being light, was super difficult because I would find myself saying things, you know, not to hurt anyone, but knowing that it was hurting people. Just because of the darkness that was just flowing in that place. It got really bad to the point that I was just crying out to God. I was begging him to take me out of that place because it was so bad. But, you know, I don't regret it at all because being there taught me spiritually. It grew me spiritually, you know, because when I look at, like, where I am now today, even, like, you know, with work, I'm able to discern now, you know what I mean? And it really taught me during that time, you know what I mean? It taught me, so I don't regret it at all. During that time, I had to persevere through not having a phone, no friends, no family, without a job. My goodness, spiritual warfare, sleepless nights, pain, sickness. Oh my goodness, it was really, really tough, you know, and just, it was, oh my, you know, the warfare, the darkness I was just going, it was just like not really knowing where God was taking me, was just trusting in his plan, you know, knowing that what he was calling me to do and just trusting in that and just going, trusting in what God was calling me to do and just letting him lead and God be walking by faith. It was like I knew what God was calling me to. I didn't know how he was going to make the way though. So I just started walking. I just was walking with God. It was tough though. I was hospitalized during that time, homelessness, but, you know, all those things that God allowed me to go through, it helped me to, you know, my faith got stronger, you know what I mean? My faith was more stronger, you know, and I learned to have faith in God, and I had, like, you know, my faith grew so much in the Lord. Even during that time when I was in the hospital, I knew that my peace was so set because I already knew that God started having handled, because how he grew my faith during everything that I would have to persevere through and go through, and just kind of, like, you know, from what he showed me, he revealed himself to me with signs, miracles, and wonders, and, you know, trusting him and leaving, like, the state, and, like, knowing that he's always made a way and that my life was in his hand, that, you know, my life was in his hand. So regardless of whether whatever happened, I was going to be okay. Whether that was death or whether that was him doing or healing me, either way it went, I had peace on that, knowing that if I died, I went to heaven, and if however God wanted to heal me, whether I was going to be going through chemo, if they thought I had cancer, I don't have cancer. I have IgG for it. But whatever way it had been, I had a peace knowing that, you know, I knew that whatever I was going to stick with God through it was going to be work for the good, and I knew that, and I had peace with that, so, you know, it was okay. Everything that I went through, it taught me, you know, it changed me for the better. It really worked out for my good, you know. I can testify to that things really do work out for the greater good. Now I'm able to fight the battle of faith, you know what I mean? I mean, run the race of faith and also fight the battle that the enemy will send your way. You know what I mean? Now I know, you know, what's God and what's not God. I'm learning. I'm still in the process of learning what is and what's not him. But I do learn from what the things that God allows, that he allows me to go through. You know what I mean? From the pain, you know. So, yeah, because now I'm stronger. I'm wiser, you know. I'm really, really very much like, you know, I don't regret it all, because now I see how all of that was truly teaching me on how to become who God is calling me to be. Everything I had to go through and persevere through, it made me stronger, you know, it made me have more understanding. So just know that everything that God allows us to go through, that we have to persevere through, truly does train us to be who God is calling us to be. It helps us, you know, and just know that your pain is not in vain, and that just trust God, stay that route with God. And yes, you guys, and if you feel led, please subscribe. Know that God loves you, that God loves you. Yeah, and if you guys feel led, please subscribe. And if you guys would like to order, I'll leave the link, I'll leave the website in the description of this video. But thank you guys so much. God bless, and just know that God does love you. God bless.